Chapter 1. The last breath before the moon. The salt water stung the cuts on Kael's arms. But he wouldn't let go of the fish. He couldn't. "Drop it, you sewer rat," growled Jorn, the largest of the old dock orphans, his thick hands twisting Kael's thin wrist against the wet stone. "It's ours." Ash. "The net fell off our boat." "Liar," Torin shouted, his brown hair and vivid green eyes materializing like lightning from the shadow of a pile of old nets. His slender body was pure tension, his green eyes gleaming beneath the dirt on his face. "You don't even have a net. You stole one from old Marin?" Torin didn't attack Jorn, that was suicide. Instead, he aimed for the second biggest, a boy with hair like seaweed, and drove his elbow into his stomach. The boy dropped like a sack, letting go of the fish he'd been trying to wrestle from Kael's grip. It was the opening they needed. Kael twisted, not to run, but to bite Jorn's arm. Not hard enough to wound, but enough to surprise. Jorn let out a yell and loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. It was enough. The two friends, in a movement born of 1,000 similar scraps, turned and ran. Not toward the main wharf, they'd be surrounded there. They scrambled over stacks of empty barrels, vaulted a small, overturned dinghy, and vanished into the labyrinth of rotten planks and abandoned ropes behind the salt warehouses that neutral territory even the coastal guards didn't venture into. They only stopped when their breath was ragged in their chests and the sound of the waves covered any possible pursuit. They sat on the damp ground, leaning against a wooden wall that smelled of low tide and rotten fish. The fish a blue-scaled wrassley between them, still twitching faintly. "We'll make a good stew," said Torin, rubbing his bruised knuckles. "Or at least we won't go to bed with our stomachs growling." Kael nodded, wiping the blood from his split lip with his already tattered sleeve. He looked at his friend. Torin was skinnier, faster, with a cleverness that shone in his eyes. Kael was stronger, quieter, the one who planned before acting. Together, they were more than survivors. They were almost brothers. Ever since the winter fevers took their families in the same year, leaving them at the mercy of the stranded village of shells. "3 more days," Torin whispered, his gaze losing its fight ferocity and taking on a distant gleam. 3 days until the blessing. A cold that wasn't from the sea ran down Kael's spine. The day of the blessing, the first day of spring. For kids like them, wharf orphans who could barely write their own names, it was the only door not locked with iron and contempt. Every year, the priests of the Temple of Calm Waters came to the Bay of Whispers. Every child who turned 10 that lunar month was brought forward. They placed their hands on the awakening shell, an artifact white as sea foam brought from distant islands, and it would glow, or not. 30%, said the old gossips drinking in the taverns. Only 3 in 10 had the spark inside them. The innate magic, the potential, is for those who sparked a new life. Tutors, training, maybe even a spot in a minor school, far from the smell of fish and the fight for scraps. For those who didn't, they stayed on the wharf, dockhands, beggars, thieves, until their bones wore out or the sea claimed them. "We're going to spark," Kael said, his voice firmer than he felt. "Both of us. Together." Torin smiled, a rare smile that cleared the grime from his face. "Right then. I'll learn water magic and bring a tsunami just to wash Jorn and his gang away." They laughed, the sound echoing softly in the rotten wood. It was a fantasy. A small, fragile flame they kept alive in their chests, more valuable than any fish. The 3 days passed like a fever dream. Every barrel hauled, every barge unloaded. Every black I earned in a fight over a piece of stale bread, all of it was pierced by a single thought. The blessing, on the morning of the day, the whole village seemed to hold its breath. Mothers scrubbed their children with fragrant herbs, fathers straightened mended clothes with sad pride. For Kael and Torin, there was no one to scrub or straighten. They washed in the cold seawater, scrubbing the grime from their skin until it hurt. Torin found a less torn shirt for Kael. Kael tied back Torin's wild hair with a piece of clean rope. They looked like 2 gaunt soldiers preparing for the battle of their lives. In the Bay of Whispers, a small white sand cove protected by tall rocks, the atmosphere was one of stifling solemnity. About 30 children were lined up, the wharf orphans mixed with the children of fishermen and small merchants. In the center, on a pedestal of smooth stone, rested the awakening shell. Beside it stood the human priest of the Temple of Calm Waters. Dressed in blue and white, and Shaman Kael, the scaly-skinned semi-human elder representing the Tide Council. One by one, the children approached. They touched the shell. Most times, nothing happened. A faint, fleeting glow indicated minimal potential, perhaps for domestic magics. But sometimes the shell pulsed with a vibrant, near-blinding blue light, and a whisper of waves filled the air. Kael's heart beat like a trapped drum in his chest. He held Torin's hand tightly, their fingers interlaced like roots. The shipwright sun sparked. Semi-human girl with faint gills sparked. Their hearts tightened. Torin was called before Kael. He let go of Kael's hand, his green eyes meeting his friend's brown ones for an infinite second. Together, they seemed to say. He walked to the shell. His hand, thin and marked by cuts, hovered over the pearlescent surface for a moment before touching it. Nothing. The shell remained cold, mute, dull as a common stone. Torin's face didn't contort. He didn't cry, just emptied. The light of that inner flame that kept him nimble and hopeful went out, replaced by a resignation so profound it hurt Kael more than any beating. Then, it was Kael's turn. His feet felt like lead. He saw Torin's empty gaze in the line. He felt the weight of all the hungry nights, of all the dreams shared in whispers in the dark. He placed his hand on the shell, and the world exploded in light. It wasn't just a glow, it was an eruption. The shell became a small blue sun, casting patterns of water and light on the surrounding rocks. A roar of distant waves filled the bay, and the very air grew humid and heavy with salt. The priest and the shaman exchanged a look of astonishment. This wasn't common potential. This was something ancestral. Kael didn't feel euphoria. He felt an icy void opening inside him. He took his hand away, and the light vanished. The first sound he heard wasn't the impressed murmurs of the crowd, but a muffled sob coming from the line. The ceremony ended. 3. Only 3 had sparked with noteworthy power. Kael, the shipwright's son, and the half-siren girl. The orphans who hadn't passed were gathered like dejected cattle. Some cried softly, others just stared at the sand, their futures sealed in that silence. Torin was among them, his profile a statue of silent despair. Kael was led to the front. A man approached Captain Lorn, one of the village's lords, owner of 3 merchant ships. His gaze was calculating, not kind. "The boy comes with me," he announced to the priest. "I have an arrangement with the Safe Span School, an apprenticeship for one with potential. He'll serve." Kael barely heard him. His eyes were locked on Torin. The captain seemed to perceive the tension. For a rare instant, something like pity or, perhaps just boredom, crossed his austere face. "You have until sunset to say your goodbyes. He sails with my ship on the night tide." And he turned, leaving the 2 friends alone amid the dispersing crowd. They ran toward each other, not as children, but as castaways, grabbing the last plank. The hug was hard, desperate, bone against bone. "You sparked," Torin whispered against Kael's shoulder, his voice hoarse. "You really did." I saw. "Doesn't matter," said Kael, the words tumbling out in a whirlwind. "I'm not going, not without you. I'll run away. Well, let's shut up." Torin pulled away, gripping Kael's shoulders. Down. His green eyes, now red-rimmed but dry, burned with a quiet fury. "You're going. You're getting on that ship. You're learning everything you can. You're going to become the greatest water mage this god's-forsaken continent has ever seen. Got it, Torin?" "I promise," Torin interrupted, his voice low and laden with a solemn vow. "I promise I'll be okay. I'll keep going. I'll fight. I'll eat. I'll survive. I won't become a wharf statistic. And one day I'll find you again. Not as a beggar, as someone." Kael wanted to argue, wanted to cry, wanted to smash the shell into 1,000 pieces. But he saw the determination on the face of the brother blood hadn't given him. It was the same determination that had kept them alive every day. Torin was transferring his hope to him. "And I promise," Kael swallowed the knot in his throat, "that I'll come back when I can. I'll get you out of here. We'll have a house." "No smell of rotten fish." Torin gave a sad smile, his last of the day. "No smell of rotten fish," he repeated, like a prayer. The sun began to sink, painting the sky orange and purple. Captain Lorne's call echoed from the wharf. The last hug was quick, almost brutal. Neither cried. Tears were a luxury their life had never allowed. "Go," Torin whispered, taking a step back, disappearing into the long shadow of the warehouses. Go spark for the both of us, Kael. Kael turned and walked toward the ship, each step feeling like he was leaving a piece of himself behind on the damp sand. The blessing now felt like a curse. The door opening for him was the same one slamming shut in Torin's face, locking him on the other side. He climbed the gangplank, the smell of new wood and tar filling his nostrils, replacing the familiar scent of low tide and friendship. He looked toward the shore, at the maze of planks and shadows that was his only home. There, nearly invisible, a thin silhouette raised a hand in a final wave. Kael raised his in reply. And then, the ship pulled away from the stranded village of shells, carrying with it a boy whose heart was torn between the light of an uncertain future and the silent darkness of the brother left behind. End of part 1. Thank you for getting this far. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this. Chapter 2. Tears and Currents. 3 years don't erase an absence. They refine it, transforming it into a solid and familiar weight that Torin, with his brown hair and green eyes, carried on his shoulders every day, along with the sacks of salt and the barrels of fish. Almost 13, he was taller, harder. The bones of his face stood out under skin tanned by sun and salt. His green eyes, however, had regained a shine. Not the naive shine of magical hope, but the sharp glint of intentional survival. That shine was due to Mistress Alara. He found her, or she found him in an alley behind the fish market, soaked in his own water, blood, and despair. Jorn and his thugs had gone too far that night. Torin remembered the taste of metal, the darkness closing in, and then a cold, soft touch, like deep water. Alara gathered him up like a wounded crab, taking him to her waterside shack built on stilts, where the sound of waves slapped the beams. She was a semi-human of the electric eel variety. From the waist down, and from shoulders to hands, her skin was smooth, dark, and faintly luminescent, marked by subtle patterns that resembled the silent discharge of a deep-sea creature. Her face, however, was human, with soft, tired features and delicate, pale gills pulsing behind her ears when she was emotional. Widow of a human fisherman, she made a living mending nets and preparing bait, a solitary, modest trade. For Torin, she wasn't a mother. She was a safe harbor. She gave him a roof, a bowl of seaweed soup, and more precious than anything, respect. Not pity, but a quiet seriousness that restored his dignity. He, in return, worked like a man possessed. He hauled, mended, fished, protected. The shack had never been so intact, the nets never so well knotted. And it was under that roof, listening to Alara hum sea songs in a half-human, half-aquatic whisper language, that the goddess's tear day ceased to be a distant ghost and became a concrete lifeline. At 13, every teenager was brought before a statue of Ethelwyn to receive a vision, a glimpse of their innate calling. It wasn't magic, it was direction. For someone like Torin, it was the last door before the cliff of eternal insignificance. The day dawned clear. Torin put on the least mended tunic Alara had prepared for him. She adjusted the collar with her strange-skinned hands, her brown eyes serious. "Don't wait for miracles, boy," she said, her voice a trickle of running water. "Wait for truth. And use it, whatever it is." He nodded, his heart pounding so hard he feared breaking his ribs. The central tower of the stranded village of Shells was small, a dark stone cylinder by the sea. Inside, the air smelled of damp incense and moss. In the center, on a pedestal of fossilized shells, stood the statue of Ethelwyn, the Lady of Paths. Not the glorious image of Valoria, but a crude carving, her face worn by salt, holding an upturned shell from which once a year dripped a single tear of Wisdoma silvery, ethereal substance that was not water, not a tear, but pure potential concentrate. The village teenagers formed a silent line. They were children of merchants, fishermen, a few young semi-humans. Torin felt the stares piercing him, the wharf orphan, the eel's pet. He kept his back straight, his eyes fixed on the statue. One by one, they knelt. The tear, forming slowly on the shell's edge, fell into the cupped hands of the youth. Some frowned, others smiled weakly, others seemed disappointed. One boy awakened to fine carpentry, a girl to herbal healing. Useful skills, honest, nothing to get someone off the wharf. Then it was Torin's turn. He knelt on the cold stone. The goddess's shadow covered him. He looked up at the worn face and thought of Kael. He thought of Elara. He thought of the feel of the slippery fish in his hands, the pain of hunger, the rough texture of the rope that had saved his life countless times. The silver tear formed, shone against the dark stone, and fell. It didn't reach his hands. It floated, hanging in the air between his chest and the statue. Then, like a condensed moonbeam, it shot forth and touched his forehead. The world disappeared. He was no longer in the tower. He was in a place of pure wind and infinite sky. There was no smell of fish, only the cold scent of altitude. In his hands there were no nets, but the solid, perfect weight of a bow made of light and bone. And in his heart there was no direction, but an absolute certainty, a connection so intimate with the air, the trajectory, the distant point, that it was as if he could bend the very space between the arrow and the target. Celestial Archer. The name echoed in his mind, not as words, but as an ancestral call. One of the rarest and most respected combat skills in Etheria. Not brute force, it was precision, patience, vision. It was the skill of an elite sharpshooter, a sentinel, a hunter of distant threats. It was a hero skill, not a Dawkins. The vision dissolved. Torin returned to the tower, gasping, hands trembling. An absolute silence enveloped him. Everyone stared, mouths agape. The auxiliary shaman, an elderly lizard man, gaped at him with wide eyes. The sky has spoken, the shaman stammered, his rough voice breaking the silence. Ethowin grants the vision of infinite reach, the celestial archer. The murmur that followed was one of pure shock, looks of envy, of sudden respect, of fear. Torin felt a wave of heat rise from his stomach to his face. It wasn't joy yet. It was a powerful daze, an overwhelming realization. I am not trapped. He stood up, legs weak. Without a word, he turned and left the tower, breaking through the circle of onlookers. He needed to tell Elara. He needed to see her understand, see that silent pride shine in her tired eyes. He ran, his feet pounding on the wharf stones, the sea wind drying the tears that finally escaped, tears of relief, of triumph, of future. The shack on stilts appeared ahead. And then his blood froze. For burly men, wearing beaten leather armor and weathered faces, blocked the entrance. Two canine semi-humans, muzzles drawn back in snarls, flanked them. The center, talking to one of them, was the regional priest. It's the same one who had overseen his blessing 3 years before, his face now a mask of bureaucratic severity. And beside the priest, smiling with an oily satisfaction, was Gome, the most feared loan shark in the stranded village of Shells. Pushed out the door, her hands bound by a rough rope, was Elara. Her face was pale, her gills trembled uncontrollably. Ow. Her eyes met Torin's, and in them he saw no surprise, only a deep despair and an overwhelming guilt. Ah, the little hero has arrived, said Gom, his voice a gravelly drag. Perfect. We're just settling a debt. The good lady here took out a considerable loan too. Ah, fix the roof. By medicine? The story changes. She didn't pay. And the law's clear. The priest cleared his throat. The debt was incurred before witnesses with clear interest. By the laws of Etheria and the code of the stranded, the debtor incurs debt slavery until repayment. The brand will be applied. Elara let out a muffled moan. I can pay. Give me more time, she pleaded, but her voice was weak, broken. Torin saw the scene unravel. He saw Alara's calloused hands, which had fed him. He saw the shack he'd helped repair. He saw in Gom's eyes a gleam of anticipation that went beyond the debt of a lonely fisherwoman. He didn't think. The movement was faster than reason. He crossed the distance and placed himself between the men and Elara. The debt is hers, Torin said, his voice surprisingly firm. But the body to pay it can be mine. The silence was cutting. Gom raised an eyebrow. The priest looked confused. Lara screamed, Nitrogen monoxide, Torin, don't do it. It's a trap. You don't understand. Creature, growled one of the semi-humans, pulling the rope. Torin ignored him. He looked directly at the priest. You witness my calling. I am a celestial archer. My value as a servant, or as an asset, is incomparably greater than hers. Take me in her place. Nullify her debt. Goem rubbed his chin, his smile widening. His calculating eyes appraised Torin like a rare fish at market. A celestial archer, he murmured. That changes the calculations. A lot. The priest looked troubled. The law allows substitution if the new debtor is accepted by the creditor and if his repayment capacity is greater. But boy, you don't know what you're getting into. I accept, Goem interrupted, triumphant. The boy in place of the eel, the debt is settled. We'll apply the brand to him. Ilara collapsed to the ground, sobbing, her bound hands reaching for Torin. He lied, the debt was fake. It's a scheme, Torin. They used me to lure kids with potential. It's to hand them over to him. I'm part of it. Forgive me. Forgive me. Ilara's words hit Torin like physical blows. He heard them, but couldn't process them. The betrayal was too large, too monstrous. His gaze fixed on Ilara, and for the first time, saw beyond the weary kindness. He saw the fear, the shame, the complicity. She hadn't been his savior. She had been the bait. But it was already too late. Goem took a step forward. The lady's confession is interesting, but irrelevant. The offer was made and accepted before the priest. The substitution is legal. He looked at Torin. For your rare skill, the contract will be for 15 years. 15 years of service to repay the generously revaluated debt. The priest, pale but bound to legal formality, nodded. It was done. Torin's world shrank to the cold, sharp point of that reality. The joy of being a celestial archer evaporated, replaced by the taste of ashes and iron. He didn't look back when the rough hands grabbed him. The last thing he heard was Ilara's rending wail, mixing with the sound of the waves as he was dragged away from the sea into the village's shadows. The cage was in the stuffy attic of one of Goem's warehouses. It was iron, small, smelling of mold and ancient despair. It was there, in the silent darkness, that one of the semi-human guards, for a silver coin, told him the complete truth. Ilara was a collector. She identified resilient orphans, gained their trust, and then, when they developed a valuable skill on tier day, an unexpected debt appeared. Their desperation, their sense of honor or gratitude, led them to offer themselves as sacrifices. Goem then sold them on the specialized slave market, splitting the profits with her. Torin hadn't been the first, just the most valuable. The betrayal no longer hurt. He was already numb. What grew inside him was something colder, more dangerous, a steel determination. He would survive. Not for Ilara, not for Goem, for himself, and for the promise made to a friend under an orange sky. The sale was quick. His status as a young celestial archer attracted a specific buyer, Master Vorlag, a human adventurer of silver rank. His face scarred, and eyes that evaluated people like tools. Boy, Vorlag said, examining him through the bars. Your life is about to turn upside down. You'll see horrors you never dreamed existed. You'll get your hands dirty. You'll smell like death. But if you're good, if you survive, you could end up with more power and gold than any little noble in Valoria. Interested? Torin from the cage just nodded. There was no choice. It was only the path ahead, however dark. The years that followed were a true nightmare. Vorlag was a cruel, yet efficient master. Torin, with his brown hair and green eyes, was thrown into dungeons of levels 1 and 2. Then 3. He learned to shoot not at wooden targets, but at the eyes of goblins, the weak points of trolls, the magical cores of uncontrolled constructs. His skill, the celestial archer, flourished in the darkness. He developed a sense of range, an almost magical perception of distances, winds, and trajectories. His arrows seemed to weave death with terrifying precision. He also learned to lose. It was Borin, the dwarf novice, crushed by a stone trap, while Torin tried in vain to disarm the mechanism from a distance. He saw the light in Borin's eyes go out under the dust. There was Lina, the feline semi-human, agile and silent, whose throat was torn out by a shadow wurg as she protected his flank. He heard her gurgle her last breath, her eyes seeking his in a moment of pure panic before fixing on the void. Each death was a knife twisted in his chest. Vorlag mocked. Feelings are a luxury, boy, and luxuries kill. They were weak. You are strong. Stay strong or join them. Torin no longer cried, kept the faces of the dead on a silent altar within his mind, and he kept shooting. By 21, he was a veteran. New and old marks crossed his body. His green eyes, once full of fire, were now like frozen ponds, reflecting little. He had reached silver rank in Vorlag's Adventurer Guild of Feet for a slave. The brand of submission on his forearm pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of his debt and his 15 years, which were now nearing their end. That's when Vorlag called him. In the master's tent, the adventurer rubbed his hands, his smile not reaching his eyes. We have an opportunity, a newly classified rank for dungeon, the Whispering Forges of Keldamir, an abandoned dwarven mine taken by corrupted fire elementals. The mission: retrieve the Forge Master's heart, a runic crystal at the core. The death risk is high, very high. Torin remained silent. He knew what came next. It's your last mission under my command, Vorlag continued. Complete it, bring back the crystal, and the next day, I burn your contract. The brand dissipates. You'll be free, not just from the debt. Free. It was bait. Torin knew it. But it was the only bait he couldn't refuse. Freedom. The word echoed in the emptiness of his chest like a distant bell. Who else is going? He asked, his voice rough from emotional disuse. A small team. You, of course, Dern. Our dwarf tank. Selous, the elven scout. Mira, the human summoner. And Kaelin, the swordsman. The best that are left. Torin knew them all. Dern, who grumbled, but always shared his ale. Silas, whose elven sarcasm hid a loyal heart. Mira, who treated his wounds with gentle hands. Kaelin, quiet and reliable, who always covered his back. They weren't friends, they were comrades. And in the dark alleys of dungeons, that was sometimes more important. The descent into the Whispering Forges was a plunge into hell. The air shimmered with heat, smelled of sulfur and molten metal. The walls, once beautiful carved stone, were now black and twisted, pulsing with a sickly orange light. The fire elementals weren't pure flames. They were creatures of ember and hatred, with shapes of rabid dogs, distorted wolves, and worse things. The forge profaned fire wolves. The first assault was a disaster. Dern, with his huge shield, held the line while Silas tried to flank. A firewolf, larger than the others, circled the shield and plunged into the dwarf's gut. Dern didn't even scream. His face under the helm just showed resigned surprise before the flames consumed him from within, making him explode in a shower of embers and molten metal. Dern! Mira screamed, her water summoning evaporating before touching the creature. A second wolf leaped at her. Silas threw himself in the way, his short blades flashing. He managed to deflect the attack, but a flaming paw struck him in the chest, piercing the hardened leather armor. The elf fell, gasping, his blood evaporating in the hot air with a sinister hiss. Torin shot arrow after arrow, each finding an ember eye, a heat core. 2 wolves fell. There were too many. Fall back, Kaelin ordered, his sword flashing in a defensive arc. Mira, heal Silas. Torin, cover. They retreated down a narrow corridor. Mira knelt beside Silas, her hands glowing with faint healing light. The elf coughed, a wet, terrible sound. Doesn't work, he whispered, his silver eyes losing focus. It's too hot inside. He grabbed Mira's arm. Tell a good story about me. And then his whole body seemed to char, disintegrating into a pile of fine ashes that the hot tunnel wind carried away. Mira let out a choked sob. Kaelin clenched his jaw, his eyes wet, and then the howls echoed again. More wolves. This time, led by a colossal creature, a living ember alpha the size of a bear. With magma horns and eyes that were pits of infinite fury, the battle was a massacre in slow motion. Mira tried to summon a water elemental, but the ambient heat vaporized it instantly. The alpha attacked her. Kaelin interposed himself, landing a powerful blow that cracked the creature's ember skull. But one of its flaming paws struck his side, melting the chainmail and the flesh beneath. Kaelin fell with a hoarse cry. Torin fired frantically. Arrows tipped with frost runes he saved for emergencies. They stuck in the alpha, hissing and crackling, slowing it. He ran to Kaelin. The swordsman lay on his back, breathing with difficulty, a horrible steaming hole in his flank. Torin, Kaelin whispered. dark blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. The crystal in the niche behind the Alpha. Take it and go. I'll get you out of here, Torin said, his voice broken, trying to lift the heavier man. Kael shook his head, a weak movement. Already done. He stared at Torin, and in his eyes, for a second there was no pain, only a deep acceptance. It was a good fight, Archer. His body relaxed. The light in his eyes went out. Torin knelt, alone. The Alpha, enraged and damaged, roared, advancing slowly. The lesser wolves surrounded him, their howls filling the hot air like a funeral dirge. He looked at the body Celeste's ashes, the spot where Dern had exploded, Mira's charred body, and now Kael, the last. And then, something inside him broke. It's not fear. The last tether holding him to hope. He stood up, his hand trembling as he drew a final arrow from the nearly empty quiver. It wasn't a special arrow. It was just wood and iron. He knocked it, aimed at the eye of the approaching Alpha. He knew it wouldn't matter. It would kill him. And maybe that was better. So much death, so much loss. Where was the freedom in all this? Perhaps it was only in this to stop fighting. The Alpha wolf leaped, its lava jaws opening toward the cavern ceiling, ready to swallow him whole. And then the darkness was torn apart, not by fire, by light. A bolt of pure blue-white energy, cold as the sea's depths, cut through the air and struck the Alpha in the neck. The ember creature shrieked a sound of cracking metal and dying fire and was thrown backward. A translucent barrier, looking like solidified water studded with stars, rose around Torin, separating him from the remaining wolves, who howled and recoiled from the cold light. Dazed, Torin staggered. The exhaustion, the pain, the shock, all hit at once. His legs gave way. As the darkness enveloped him, his clouded eyes tried to focus on the source of the light. Coming from the tunnel they had retreated down, a silhouette advanced. It was tall, wrapped in an aura of pulsing aquatic energy. It wasn't Vorlag. It was. Before unconsciousness took him, before his eyes closed on the pain and despair, a final image formed on his exhausted retina. A face he hadn't seen in 8 years. It's older, stronger, marked by authority and power, but unmistakable. Dark, damped hair, brown eyes that once shared a stolen fish, now blazing with devastating oceanic magic. Kael. And then there was only darkness, and the distant echo of a name that was both a war cry and a lament. End of part 2. Thank you for getting this far. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this. Chapter 3. The name I carry, the ship sailed away from the stranded shell village, as if tearing a piece of Kael's soul. His black hair and brown eyes leaving him bleeding on the sand where Torin, with her brown hair and green eyes, remained a dark and solitary silhouette against the orange sunset. Kael leaned on the railing, his knuckles white from gripping the rough wood. The tears he'd stubbornly held back finally broke, silent and hot, mixing with the sea spray. Every meter of water between him and the shore was a cut. He had abandoned his brother, left him to the darkness, the wharf, the brutal survival. Then a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It was Captain Lorne, his face carved from granite under a faded captain's hat. "Crying is good," the man said, his deep voice cutting through the sound of the waves. "Cleanses the soul." "But look well." He jerked his chin toward the shore, where Torin's silhouette was still visible, now small as a coal ember on the beach. He stayed. "You went. It wasn't luck, boy. It was a path. Your friends stayed in the harbor. You're going out into the world. And the world demands men, not weeping boys." Kael turned, his red eyes fixed on the captain. "Grow, learn, become a mage. The sea obeys, and kings listen to. Only then will you be able to reach out and pull him from the sand." The words weren't comfort. They were a mission. Sharp blade that sliced through Kael's self-pity and laid bare a cold, hard determination. He wiped his face with his sleeve, raised his chin, and nodded once. There were no more tears. "Good," said Lorne. "Now get below. You leave the smell of fish behind. From now on, you smell of ink, parchment, and power." The Safe Span School wasn't a school. It was a miracle of engineering and will. When Lorne's ship rounded the final bend of the roaring river, Kael stood frozen at the bow, mouth agape. A colossal bridge made of gray stone and black iron beams spanned the furious river. It wasn't thin and elegant. It was massive, fortified, a horizontal fortress. Towers and turrets sprouted from its sides like stone mushrooms. Windows lined its walls. Smoke rose from chimneys. And upon it, between the two enormous gate towers, a pulsing marketplace sprawled with tense wagons, and the constant buzz of commerce. The bridge itself was the school, the road, the toll station, and the symbol. 500 feet of wild river, an old sailor beside him said, spitting over the side, built by dwarves and humans 200 years ago. Below, classrooms. In the middle, the market. Above, labs and libraries. And the whole thing sways a little when the wind blows strong. Welcome to the safe span, kid. Kael felt a chill down his spine that wasn't from the wind. It was reverential. Awe. His new life began with a hot batha, first in years, and a simple apprentice's tunic. He was presented to the headmaster, Master Balder Pontifex, a dwarf whose legs were formed of living stone and whose gaze seemed to weigh a person's soul in seconds. Kael, is it? Balder grunted, examining Lauren's letter. Of the stranded, it says here. Good. You are a number, an investment. Here you will learn 3 things. Water magic, because the river and the sea don't forgive fools. Commerce, because the world revolves around gold. And how not to die, because knowledge is useless in a corpse. Understood? Good. And this Torin at the end of your name? Hey. Kael straightened his back. It's my family name, Master. Balder raised a thick eyebrow. Not a surname from around here? The dwarf watched him for a long moment, then nodded, a near smile touching his lips hidden by his beard. Good. A name with weight is better than an empty name. Go. Master Alistair Deepwater awaits you in the wet lab. Kael's education was a whirlwind. He, who could barely trace his own name, was plunged into books of runes, treatises on aquatic alchemy, maps of sea currents, and mercantile negotiation manuals. The magic classes were what set his heart alight. Water magic, he discovered, wasn't just about making water jets. It was about pressure, flow, states of matter, dissolution, healing, purification, and raw power. It was about feeling the moisture in the air, the current in the river, the tide in one's own veins. His talent was innate and deep, fueled by the constant memory of the sea, of the stranded village of shells, and the unspoken promise to Torin. He quickly stood out. While other apprentices struggled to form a stable water globe, Kael was already creating controlled waterfalls and defensive whirlpools. His teacher, Alistair, a turquoise-scaled lizard man, dubbed his gift tide sense, an almost intuitive connection to bodies of water and their flows. But the school wasn't just magic. There were practical trials in the lower courtyard, where apprentices dueled under instructor supervision. Kael was never a strength fighter, he was a strategist. He used water jets to unbalance, walls of mist to blind, instant ice armor to block blows. He learned to fight with Lyra, a quick, astute human whose air magic was his perfect antithesis. He learned about endurance from Doran, a dwarven apprentice who preferred hammers and stone shields to spells. And he learned stealth from Phelan, the feline semi-human instructor who seemed to slip between shadows. In commerce classes, he became a sharp negotiator. He learned to read contracts, appraise goods, sense the lie in a merchant's tone. He worked the bridge toll, dealing with surly carters and greedy merchants. He learned that every coin had a weight, and every weight carried a story. The years passed. Scrawny wharf boy became a young man of medium stature, but solid presence. His brown eyes, once full of fear, were now calm and observant, reflecting the depth he studied. He never allowed himself to be called just Kael. It was always Kael Stranded Torin. The name was his banner, his anchor, his promise. At 20, he was ready to graduate. He wasn't first in his class, but he was among the 3 of the current, the best hydromancers of his generation. Graduation wouldn't be a simple speech. It would be a graduation mission, a rite of passage for the most promising graduates. In the great audience hall of the North Tower, Master Balder assembled 15 graduates. Among them, the ones closest to Kael: Lyra Windstring, his rival and friend, Air Mage; Doran, Ironarm, the resilient dwarf; Ilara Seaspray, no relation to the traitor, a half-elf with an affinity for mists and aquatic illusions; Grim Frostblood, a practical and brutal human, specialist in offensive ice magic; Mira Weavecurrent, a young woman who commanded water as an extension of her dance. Your final test, Balder announced. pointing to a map on the table. The whispering forges of Coldmere, a dwarven crystal mine, taken by corrupted fire elementals. A newly classified rank for dungeon. A murmur ran through the room. Rank 4 was serious, but they were 15. 15 water and ice mages trained of near silver level if they were adventurers. It's a heavy challenge, but plausible. The objective, Balder continued, is to collect pelts from forge profaned firewolves. Their hide, if magically chilled at the moment of death, becomes a high-value, fire-resistant material. 6 pelts. That proves your control, your teamwork, and your market value. Bring them back, and your diplomas will be sealed with more than ink. They'll be sealed with merit. Kael exchanged a look with Lyra and Torin. It was dangerous, but it was also his doorway into the real world. A world where he could finally accumulate resources, influence, and perhaps find a way back to the stranded village of shells. The descent into the Whispering Forges was, initially, a display of coordinated force. The 15 mages formed a well-oiled machine. Grimm and other ice specialists created barriers and freezing lances. Alara and Mira generated dense fogs that smothered the lesser flames. Kael, Lyra, and Torin formed the offensive core. Kael destabilized elementals with pressurized water jets that hissed on contact. Lyra disoriented them with cutting wind gusts, and Torin, encased in thick ice armor, acted as a bastion, crushing already weakened creatures. They advanced through dark, steaming tunnels, collecting pelts with clinical efficiency. Confidence grew. They were academics, yes, but dangerously competent ones. That's when the sounds came. First, howls not of the bestial fire elementals, but of human and dwarven pain and despair. Then, the sound of metal on stone, of muffled screams, of the terrible crack of bones breaking under intense heat. Kael raised a hand, and the group stopped. They exchanged worried looks. Another group was down there, and they were in trouble. Detour's safer, Grimm whispered, pragmatic. They're adventurers, said Lyra, her face tense. Could be guild. Kael didn't hesitate. We can help. We're 15. It's what we're trained to. Do control fire. Without waiting for total consensus, he ran toward the sounds, his companions following. Some reluctant, others determined. The tunnel opened into a vast infernal chamber. The air shimmered with heat, smelled of burned flesh and defeat. What Kael saw was a nightmare tableau. A group of adventurers was being torn apart. A dwarf lay in charred pieces. Elven ashes were scattered by a hot wind. A human summoner tried in vain to raise a water shield that evaporated instantly before being struck down by a colossal creature, living Ember Alpha, surrounded by a pack of howling firewolves. At the center of the massacre, a last adventurer, a swordsman, fell with a horrific blow to his flank. And before him, kneeling, holding a bow, was a lean, scarred figure, shoulders slumped under the weight of absolute loss. There was no time for strategy. The Alpha was turning toward the kneeling man, its lava jaws ready for the final strike. Focus on the Alpha, Kael shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber with an authority he didn't know he had. Glacier Barrage Pattern 3. It was as if an orchestra of aquatic destruction sprang into action. 15 wands and gestures rose in unison. It's the air, once dry and searing, filled with a sudden violent cold. The Alpha barely had time to roar before a bolt of blue-white energy. Colder than an iceberg's heart, shot from Kael's hands and struck it in the neck. At the same time, a translucent dome of ice, studded with glowing runes, rose around the kneeling man, raised by the combined effort of Alara and Mira. The rest of the group fired ice lances, supercooled water jets, and icy winds at the lesser wolves, which howled and recoiled from the sudden elemental shift. The Alpha, wounded and confused, diverted its attack. Kael didn't stop. Grim Torin containment. Lyra, heat dispersal. The rest, clear the wolves. He advanced, his feet treading on still warm ashes. His attention wasn't on the battle his comrades now dominated with overwhelming force. It was on the man inside the ice dome. The man who now, weak and dazed, was collapsing to the floor. Kael ran to the barrier. The gesture, a portal opened in the ice. He entered, kneeling beside the wounded adventurer. The man was on his back, breathing with difficulty, his face covered in soot and blood. But the eyes. green eyes, devoid of hope, but familiar in a way that pierced 8 years of distance, as if it were a second. Kael placed his hands over the terrible wound in the man's flank. His hands glowed with a soft blue light, pure healing water emanating from his fingers, beginning to staunch the burn, to cool the dead flesh. The wounded man blinked, trying to focus. His vague gaze found Kael's face. And then, from his cracked lips, came a breath, a sound almost inaudible over the chaos of the battle continuing around the dome. A name Kael had carried in his own name for a decade. A name that was a cry of pain, of surprise, of absolute disbelief. Kael. The voice was unrecognizable from suffering in the years, but the look. The look was the same as the boy who had shared a stolen fish on the wharf's edge. Kael's world stopped. The sound of battle vanished. It's the cold of the ice, the heat of the inferno around. It all dissolved. There was only the battered face before him, the green eyes seeking his, and the echo of that single word. He cradled the man's face, his mage's hands now trembling not from exhaustion, but from an overwhelming emotion. "Torin," he whispered, and the word was a confession, a lament, an oath fulfilled and broken at the same time. "My brother." End of part 3. Thank you for getting this far. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this. Heart of stone, hands free. The protective circle gleamed with blue and white runes, keeping the infernal heat and the howls of the remaining firewolves at bay. Kael, with his black hair and brown eyes, pressed his hands against the terrible wound on Torin's flank, healing water flowing from his fingers in a steady, yet too slow stream. He was a hydromancer, not a skilled healer. "Let me," said a calm voice. It was Elias, the group's healer, a middle-aged man with serene eyes and hands that had seen worse wounds. He knelt beside Kael, his hands glowing with a soft golden light that smelled of fresh herbs and damp earth. "You stabilized him. Now I'll heal him." Kael pulled back, panting, watching as Elias's magic worked. Torin's charred flesh regenerated, color returned to his pale face. His deep, irregular breathing became regular and strong. In less than a minute, the mortal wound was a fresh pink scar. When Elias finished, Lyra and Doran stepped forward to help Torin stand. He was weak but conscious. His green eyes, still dull with shock, focused on Kael for a second, then fixed on the chamber. On the wounded but still living Alpha, being contained by ice barriers and water whirlpools. "No," Torin grunted, shaking off the arms supporting him. His voice was hoarse but urgent. "Need the crystal, the Forge Master's heart." In its core, Kael gripped his shoulder. "Torin, stop. Look around your comrades. They're all gone. What is that crystal going to give you now?" Torin raised his left arm with tremendous effort. He pulled back the sleeve of his scorched leather jerkin, revealing the brand of submission on his wrist, a complex, shadowy, arcane symbol that seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light. "This," he rasped, his gaze burning with a mix of hatred and desperate hope, "gives me freedom." Kael looked at the brand, then at his brother's exhausted face. The final piece of the horrible puzzle clicked into place. Debt slavery. A suicide mission for manumission. His heart clenched with a sharp, cold pain. He didn't know all the details, but he understood enough. He understood the desperation. He raised his head, his face becoming a mask of calm determination. "Then we get the crystal." The other mages exchanged hesitant looks. The Alpha, even wounded, still emanated terrifying power. Grim grumbled. "Kael, our mission was the pelts. We have 6. Don't need." "I need," Kael interrupted, his voice not raised, but laden with a final authority. "Anyone who wants to fall back, fall back. Protect our retreat." "I'm going with them," but no one fell back. They formed a defensive rearguard as the group retreated through the tunnels. Now, clear of minor threats, back to the base camp they'd established in a secure chamber near the entrance. Their 3 instructor evaluators from the safe span awaited them, observing everything with critical eyes. Seeing the state of the group and the strange wounded man, the instructors acted. Mistress Thalassa, an ancient lizard woman, activated a runic artifact that emitted a wave of pure arcane fear, driving all dungeon creatures from the area for hours. The camp became a silent bubble of safety, a surreal contrast to the hell of minutes before. Torin was taken to a medical tent. Elias and Thalassa administered vigor elixirs and health potions that restored his physical strength, though nothing could cure the years of weariness in his soul. Kael waited outside, his fists clenched. When the instructors came out, gesturing he could enter, he pulled back the tent flap and saw Torin sitting on a cot, looking at his empty hands. The brand on his wrist seemed more visible under the magical lantern light. For hours, Kael just listened. He sat on the tent floor and listened as Torin spoke of Alara, the betrayal, the cage, the sail, spoke of Vorlag, the dungeons, the deaths of Borin, of Lina, of Silas, of Mira, of Kaelin. Each name was said with a coldness that tried to hide a deep tremor. He spoke of the contract, the 15 years, the promise of freedom. He spoke of the last mission, the trap he knew it was, but had to believe in. Kael didn't cry. His face was a smooth stone, but inside an ocean of fury and pain roared. The life he'd imagined for Torin hard, yes, but honorable was a nightmare worse than any dungeon. His brother had been broken and patched with cold steel and ashes. When Torin finished, the silence in the tent was thick. "You're not alone anymore," Kael said finally, his voice low but firm as riverbed rock. "We're getting that crystal, and you will be free." He left the tent and went to the group of classmates, who were resting or checking their gear. Lyra, Doran, Ilara, Grim, Mira, and Elias looked at him. "I need to go back down there," Kael said. "I need your help to defeat the Alpha. It's not for the school, it's for him." Lyra stood first. "He's the family you carried in your name all these years, isn't he?" Kael nodded. "He's my family too," she said, picking up her staff. One by one, the other 6 stood. Doran thumped his hammer on his shield. A dwarf knows the value of paying a debt. "Let's go." The instructors watched, but did not interfere. For them, it was another test, the final test of character and loyalty. Only Mistress Thalassa approached Kael. "The debt you owe the school for this intervention will be paid with future service. But go, bring your brother back." The second assault on the Alpha's chamber was a symphony of coordinated destruction. The creature, still weakened by the first battle, was met by a perfect storm. Grim and Doran contained it with ice walls and crushing blows. Alara and Myra enveloped it in paralyzing mists and viscous water currents. Lyra deflected its attacks with cutting winds. Elias kept the group protected with preventative healing barriers. And Kael. Kael was the heart of the storm. He didn't fight with rage, fought with a calculated coldness, born of 8 years of study, of waiting, of promise. He channeled his fury at what had been done to Torin into pure power. Water jets capable of cutting steel pierced the Alpha's weak points. Frost spread from its feet, immobilizing the ember paws. He controlled the air's moisture, smothering the flames the creature tried to regenerate. The battle was brutal. Doran took a blow that cracked his ice armor. Lyra had to dodge a jet of magma. They were 7. And they were united. Kael, seeing the Alpha staggering, its lava eyes losing their glow, mustered his last energies. He raised both hands, and the moisture from the entire chamber condensed into a single point above the ICAR. The sphere of compressed water the size of a human head, spinning so fast it sang. With a final gesture, he launched it. The sphere hit the Alpha in the chest with the impact of a tide. It didn't explode. It imploded, pulling the heat inward and freezing it instantly. The ember creature let out a final crack, its body becoming a statue of black rock and fissured ice. Silence. Then Torin, who had been watching from behind the line with a borrowed bow in his hands, stepped forward. His eyes weren't on the fallen monster, but on the point where the Alpha's chest was cracked. Inside, between ribs of steaming rock, pulsed a soft orange light, the Forge Master's heart. A perfect hexagonal crystal the size of a fist. He didn't hesitate. He knocked an arrow, aimed not to kill, but for precision. The arrow flew and struck the exact joint of a fissure. A dry snap echoed, and the crystal came loose, rolling onto the stony floor. Torin walked to it, picked it up. It was warm, but didn't burn. It pulsed with an ancient, powerful energy. He looked at Kael, and for the first time since the reunion, something beyond pain or urgency shone in his eyes. hope. The exit from the dungeon was a silent, triumphant march. At the base camp, Kael went straight to Mistress Thalassa. "I need you to come with us," he said, "for the crystal's delivery." To ensure his freedom is honored, Thalassa studied his face, then Torin's, who held the crystal like it was a grenade. "This will cost," she repeated. "I'll pay any cost," Kael replied without blinking. The journey back to the frontier town where Vorlag was based took 2 days. 2 days of dusty roads, camps under the stars, and conversation. For the first time in 8 years, the walls between them fell. Kael told of the school, the bridge, the trials, the weight and honor of carrying the name Torin. Torin slowly let the coldness drop. He laughed hearing about Doran's antics, seemed impressed by Lyra's power, and even smiled a small, rare smile when Kael imitated Master Baldur's gravelly voice. They were men now. One, a mage with the marks of education and power. The other, a warrior with the scars of survival and betrayal. But between them, there were still the 2 boys who had shared a stolen fish. In the town, the delivery was tense. They found Vorlag in a grimy bar near the Adventurers Guild. The man was surprised to see Torin alive, and even more surprised to see the crystal and the imposing group of mages, led by a lizard mistress who radiated arcane authority. "The contract," Torin said flatly, extending the crystal. "Fulfilled." Vorlag took the crystal, his eyes gleaming with greed. Then, his eyes narrowed. The contract said retrieve, but it said nothing about external aid. "You brought a personal army, slave? Doesn't that void the terms?" That's when Thalassa stepped forward. "Master Vorlag," she said, her voice sibilant and cold. "I am Thalassa, mistress of arcanum law and ethics at the Safe Span. I examined the brand. The contract specifies the retrieval of the Forge Master's heart. It does not specify means. The slave fulfilled it. The debt is settled. As the designated assessor, I attest to this. If you disagree..." She made a subtle gesture, and the shadows in the bar seemed to lengthen and hiss. "I can summon the Interracial Council of Justice to examine your contractual practices. I hear they are especially interested in cases of trafficking youths with rare skills." Vorlag paled. The name Safe Span carried weight. The threat of an interracial council which could involve dwarves, elves, and even representatives from Arcanum was terrifying. He swallowed dryly, forcing a tense smile. Of course. A misunderstanding. He pulled a blackened scroll from his bagtha, binding contract. With a match, he lit one corner. The flame consumed the scroll with a greenish glow, and on Torin's wrist, the brand of submission began to dissolve. The dark lines faded like smoke, leaving only clean skin scarred, but free. Torin looked at his wrist, then at the ashes of the contract on the floor. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just took a deep breath, as if it were the first true breath in a decade. The coldness in his eyes didn't disappear, but now there was a space, a small crack where something else could grow. Vorlag, feeling defeated and threatened, just muttered about lost pieces and bad investments before leaving the bar, clutching the crystal like a consolation prize. They stayed in town 3 more days. Kael needed to return to the Safe Span for the official graduation ceremony. Torin, now a free man without direction, stayed with him. On the last night, sitting by the river that ran through the town, under the same stars that had watched them grow, Kael spoke. "I have to go back, get my diploma, close this chapter. But I've a plan." Torin looked at him, his face lit by moonlight. "The school owes me favors," Kael continued. "And I am one of the 3 of the current. I can get a scholarship, a place, for a special student. Someone with a unique long-range combat skill that needs refining, supplemented with support magic, strategy, logistics." Torin understood. "You want to put me in the school?" "I want to give you a new start," Kael corrected. "Not as a slave, not as a disposable adventurer. As Torin, the celestial archer. As my brother. And then we can decide together. Go back to the Stranded. Go to Arcanum, start a magical escort company. The world is big, and now you can choose." Torin was silent for a long time, watching the river's current. I don't know how to be anything else, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I didn't know how to be a mage either, Kael said, smiling. We learned. Together. The next morning, they said goodbye on the road that split. Kael would take a merchant ship Priver back to the safe span. Torin would accompany him to the dock. I'll sort everything out in a month, Kael promised, gripping Torin's shoulders. I'll send you a message through the guild system. Stay in the city, at the Grizzled Mariner Inn. I'll meet you there. Torin nodded. Words were hard. Instead, he pulled Kael into a strong, quick, but meaningful hug. It was the hug of a brother who thought he was dead, embracing the brother who brought him back to life. Don't be long, Torin said, his voice rough. Kael smiled, his eyes shining. We already waited 8 years. A month is nothing. He climbed the ship's gangplank. This time he didn't cry. He smiled. He smiled at the brother on solid ground, a free man, with a future ahead, a future that, for the first time, they would build together. The ship pulled away. Torin remained on the dock, no longer a silhouette of despair, but an upright figure, watching the ship disappear around the river bend. He touched his wrist where the brand had been. Nothing, just skin and bone, just possibility. He turned and started walking back to the city, to the inn, to the month of waiting. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the waiting didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. They weren't two orphans fighting the current. They were two men, one with the strength of deep waters, the other with the precision of the open sky. And Etheria, with all its wonders and horrors, would have to make room for them both. It should be the end, but we're in Etheria, so it's just another beginning. Thank you for getting this far. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this.